The process server knocked on our Brooklyn apartment door with a sound that made my stomach drop. "Gwen, you've been served," he said, thrusting the thick envelope into my shaking hands without meeting my eyes. My family was suing me for ruining their honor by marrying the woman I loved, and in that moment I realized this fight would force me to choose between the life I was born into and the life I had chosen. It had all started 2 years earlier when I left the suffocating expectations of my Atlanta family home for a fresh start in Chicago as a marketing executive. The firm was buzzing with energy, and that was where I first met Carter at the company holiday party. She stood by the window overlooking the frozen river, her laugh cutting through the chatter like a lifeline. As the new head of finance, she had this quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. We talked for hours about everything from market strategies to the quiet loneliness of living away from family. And for the first time, I felt truly seen, not as the eldest daughter destined for a traditional marriage, but as Gwendolyn, the woman with dreams of her own. Our first date was at a cozy cafe in Lincoln Park where the autumn leaves painted the paths in gold. Carter listened patiently as I poured out the pressure from home, the endless setups with sons of my father's business partners, and the constant fear of disappointing my mother. She shared her story of growing up in California with parents who were supportive but distant after she came out. There was no judgment, just understanding, and by the end of the evening, her hand brushed mine, sending sparks through me. Over the following months, our connection grew stronger through long walks along Lake Michigan, late-night talks on my balcony, and the way she made me laugh even on the hardest days. Yet every time I considered telling my family, the words caught in my throat. My mother had drilled into me since childhood that family honor came first, a polished image of Southern success with a husband, children, and the family business legacy. Falling in love with Carter felt like the ultimate betrayal of that world. The internal war raged inside me every single day. Nights after family phone calls where my mother would casually ask if I had met any nice men left me staring at the ceiling, questioning my choices. Was I selfish for wanting this happiness? Was I destroying the foundation my parents had built with sweat and sacrifice? Carter was incredibly patient, but I could see the quiet pain in her eyes when I hesitated to make our relationship public. One evening, after another tense call with my father demanding I attend the annual company gala, she sat me down, her voice gentle but firm. "Gwen, I love you deeply, but I cannot keep living in the shadows. If this is real, we have to face it together." Her words hit me like a wave, because she was right. I was exhausted from the double life, the constant fear of being found out. In that moment, I made the decision to bring her home for the holidays, no more hiding. The trip to Atlanta was filled with tension from the moment we landed. My parents greeted Carter with polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. My mother pulled me aside in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. "She seems nice, dear, but you know how people talk in our circles. We have a reputation to maintain. The family name means everything." I tried to explain how Carter completed me, how she made me feel alive in ways no one else ever had, but the disappointment in her eyes was crushing. My father was even more direct during dinner, his face stern. "Gwendolyn, you have responsibilities to this family. This phase, whatever it is, needs to end now." The arguments escalated over the week, with my younger sister Clara caught in the middle trying to play peacemaker. She had always been my closest ally, but even she seemed uneasy around Carter, avoiding deeper conversations. Back in Chicago after that painful visit, Carter and I drew even closer, the opposition only fueling our bond. We began planning a small, intimate wedding in a private garden overlooking the lake, choosing simple rings and writing vows that captured our journey. It felt natural and right, yet the doubts whispered constantly in my mind. Would this cost me my inheritance, the family connections, everything familiar? Carter sensed my turmoil and held me one night, her embrace warm and steady. "Whatever comes, we face it side by side. You are not alone anymore." Her strength became my anchor, helping me push through the fear. The wedding day dawned crisp and beautiful on an autumn morning, with only a handful of close friends in attendance. As I stood facing Carter in her elegant white suit and me in a flowing dress, the officiant spoke words of love and commitment that filled my soul with peace. When we kissed, everything felt aligned for the first time in my life. But the joy was fleeting. Within hours, my phone lit up with furious messages. My mother called, screaming about the humiliation I had brought upon them. My father sent a formal letter severing all financial ties. The news spread rapidly through our social circles back home, with old friends distancing themselves and whispers following me everywhere. The pressure mounted, but in Carter's arms I found a fragile peace. Little did I know that peace would shatter completely when the lawsuit papers arrived 2 months later. They accused me of intentional damage to the family reputation, citing emotional distress and moral issues tied to some trust fund clauses. It was a declaration of war from the people who raised me. Preparing for the legal battle forced me to confront every buried fear and doubt. Was my love truly worth this destruction? The nights grew long as I lay awake weighing the cost of my choices against the alternative of a life lived in silence. Carter remained my rock, helping organize documents and reminding me of our rights. But the strain showed on both of us: the constant stress, the hateful anonymous messages online. The days after the lawsuit papers arrived blurred into a nightmare of strategy sessions and sleepless nights. Our lawyer Rebecca, a no-nonsense woman from a downtown firm, warned us that while the claims seemed outrageous, my family's wealth and connections made this a serious threat. They were not just suing for damages, they wanted the marriage declared invalid to protect some inheritance clause that required traditional family values. Carter held my hand tightly during those meetings, her presence the only thing keeping me grounded. Yet inside my mind raced with questions that tore at my soul. Had I really inflicted this pain on purpose, or was their reaction the true betrayal of unconditional love? As we prepared our defense, I found myself lost in memories of childhood. The lake house summers where my mother taught me to swim, the holidays filled with laughter and stories of our family's rise from humble beginnings. Now those same people viewed me as a threat to everything they built. The guilt gnawed relentlessly, making me question if I was the selfish one for choosing authenticity over conformity. Carter noticed my growing withdrawal, and one quiet evening she pulled me onto the couch, her eyes filled with concern. "Gwen, talk to me. I can see the weight crushing you." We discussed the moral dilemma for hours: love versus loyalty, the right to happiness versus the duty to family. Her patience helped, but the doubts lingered like shadows. Social backlash hit hard and fast. Colleagues at work began avoiding eye contact in the hallways, and old friends from Atlanta posted vague, social media comments about preserving family values without naming me directly. The isolation amplified my inner turmoil. I started wondering if I should have compromised, perhaps kept the relationship hidden longer, or even ended it to spare everyone the pain. The thought made me physically ill, but the alternative of losing my entire support system was terrifying. One afternoon, Clara called, her voice hesitant and shaky. "Sis, Mom and Dad are falling apart. They say this lawsuit is their only way to save face." I begged her to understand my side, to remember how we used to dream together about living freely. She promised to try, but I heard the hesitation, the pull of their influence. That call planted the first seed of betrayal, a crack in the sisterly bond one had always relied on. The tension in our home grew with every passing week. Carter and I argued more often, not out of anger, but out of fear, the stress manifesting in small things like forgotten groceries or sharp words over nothing. I apologized each time, knowing she was suffering too, yet carrying the heavier load of supporting my crumbling resolve. In quiet moments, I reflected on the price we were paying: lost relationships, damaged careers, the constant anxiety. Was this the cost of true love? Or had I dragged her into my family's war unnecessarily? The awakening came slowly. Through those reflections, I realized suppression had its own devastating price. Years of hiding who I was had left me hollow. Fighting now felt like the only path to wholeness, even if it meant facing the storm. My father reached out unexpectedly, requesting a meeting at a neutral cafe in the city. His face looked older, etched with new lines of worry and anger. "Gwendolyn, this has escalated beyond reason. Drop the defiance, come home, and we can resolve this quietly." I tried to explain the joy Carter brought me, the way she made every ordinary day meaningful. He shook his head, dismissing it as a phase, a rebellion against upbringing. The words reopened old wounds of never measuring up to their vision. I left the cafe in tears, the chasm between us wider than ever. Back home, Carter held me as I broke down, her steady heartbeat the only constant in the chaos. The first court hearing approached under a stormy sky that mirrored the turmoil inside me. As we entered the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions about the Ellis family drama. My family sat across the room, their lawyers polished and aggressive. When my mother took the stand, her testimony painted me as confused, misguided, a daughter led astray by outside influences. Her voice cracked with emotion as she spoke of lost grandchildren and tarnished legacy, hitting me like physical blows. Carter testified next, her calm strength a beacon in the storm, describing our love as genuine, not a threat. The room crackled with tension, every word a potential turning point in the battle for my identity. Sitting there, I understood this was bigger than a legal document. It was a fight for the right to define my own happiness. The internal conflict raged, but I knew turning back was impossible. The trial opened with an intensity that left no room for doubt about the stakes. Rebecca had prepared us meticulously, but nothing could ready me for the raw emotion of facing my family in that formal setting. My sister Clara took the stand next, her eyes avoiding mine, as she echoed the family's narrative of disappointment and reputational harm. The betrayal cut deep. This was the girl I had defended from bullies in school, the one who knew all my secrets. Hearing her testify about how my choices had strained family business deals made the moral dilemma sharper than ever. Was blood thicker than truth, or had their demand for conformity become the real betrayal? Cross-examination revealed cracks in their story, small inconsistencies about the trust fund clauses that Rebecca pounced on skillfully. I watched my mother flinch when questioned about her own past decisions, a hint of hypocrisy that planted seeds of doubt in my mind. The days blurred into a cycle of testimonies and recesses where Carter and I huddled in quiet corners whispering words of encouragement. Her unwavering support contrasted sharply with the family's united front, making me question if I had undervalued our bond in my guilt-ridden thoughts. Late one night in our hotel room, I confessed the depth of my doubts. What if they are right and I am destroying everything for a selfish desire? Carter cupped my face, her eyes steady. Love is never selfish when it is true. You are not destroying, you are building something real. Social prejudice seeped into every aspect of the case. Local news picked up the story, framing it as a clash of traditional values versus modern choices. Old acquaintances reached out with messages that mixed concern with judgment, leaving me feeling exposed and judged by the world. At one point during a break, a reporter cornered me asking if I regretted the marriage. I answered honestly no, but the question lingered, fueling my inner turmoil. The price of my decision was becoming painfully clear: fractured relationships, lost professional opportunities, and a constant emotional exhaustion that tested my resolve daily. Confrontations outside the courtroom added layers to the drama. My father cornered me in the hallway one afternoon, his voice low and urgent. Gwendolyn, think of your future, the family name. This woman is not worth losing everything. His words stung, reopening old insecurities, but I stood firm, explaining that Carter was my future, my everything. The exchange left me shaking but also strangely empowered, a small step toward awakening from the shadow of their expectations. Carter waited for me afterward, pulling me into a quiet embrace that spoke volumes without words. As the trial progressed deeper into the second week, key evidence emerged about the family's own history. Rebecca uncovered documents showing inconsistencies in past business dealings masked under the guise of honor. The revelations hit the courtroom like a bombshell, forcing my family to defend their moral high ground with increasing desperation. I sat listening to the arguments, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness. This was not the victory I wanted, it was a painful unmasking of the illusions that had shaped my life. The psychological toll was immense, nights filled with nightmares of losing Carter, or being disowned forever. But each morning I woke with renewed determination. The trade-off was clear: authenticity demanded sacrifice, but the alternative was a life of silent regret. The heart of the trial brought the most intense confrontations yet. My mother's cross-examination turned heated as Rebecca pressed on the family definition of honor versus the reality of their actions. She broke down on the stand, her voice trembling as she admitted the pressure she felt to maintain appearances at all costs. In that moment I saw her not as the unyielding matriarch, but as a woman trapped in her own web of expectations, a mirror to my past self. The empathy mixed with anger created a whirlwind in my chest. Was I repeating her mistakes by fighting so hard, or breaking the cycle? Carter testified again, this time detailing the subtle ways prejudice had affected our daily life: the stares, the whispers, the lost invitations. Her words resonated with the jury, their faces softening as she spoke of our shared dreams and the strength we found in each other. Listening to her, I felt a profound gratitude that overshadowed the guilt. The betrayal by Clara came to a head when she was recalled for further questioning. Under pressure, she admitted the family's promises of financial incentives for her testimony, a revelation that shattered the last illusion of family unity. The courtroom gasped, and I felt a wave of sadness for the sister I had lost, but also a strange liberation. The moral choice was no longer gray. Standing for truth meant accepting the loss. The days dragged with closing arguments that dissected every aspect of our lives. My family's lawyer painted me as reckless, irresponsible, while Rebecca countered with stories of resilience and love conquering prejudice. Each word weighed on me, forcing deeper reflection on the decisions that led here. Had I considered the full cost when I said I do to Carter? The impact on my parents' health, the strain on the family business, the internal awakening intensified. I realized that hiding would have cost me my soul, while fighting, though painful, was the path to genuine peace. Carter and I spent evenings debriefing the day's events, her hand in mine, a reminder of why we endured. Social fallout continued outside the walls of justice. Former colleagues distanced themselves and community events became awkward encounters filled with forced smiles. The drama extended to my professional life, with whispers affecting projects and promotions. Yet through it all, Carter remained steadfast, her quiet support a lifeline. One particularly difficult day, after a tense session, I broke down in her arms, questioning if the fight was worth the destruction. She whispered back that our love was the foundation, everything else could be rebuilt. Her words anchored me, helping me navigate the trade-offs with clearer eyes. As the trial neared its end, the tension peaked with final witness statements. A family friend testified about the broader impact on the community, highlighting how prejudice masked as honor perpetuated harm. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. I sat there, heart pounding, realizing the verdict would not just decide our legal status, but affirm or deny the validity of our existence in the eyes of the system. The psychological journey had transformed me from a guilt-ridden daughter to a woman embracing her truth despite the cost. The price had been high, but the growth profound. The final week of the trial brought revelations that shifted the entire narrative. Rebecca presented evidence of the family's own marital history documents, showing legal irregularities in my parents' union that had been overlooked for the sake of appearances. The hypocrisy stunned the courtroom, my mother visibly shaken as the details unfolded. In that moment, the moral landscape cleared for me. Their demand for perfection was built on selective truths. I felt a surge of empowerment mixed with sorrow for the illusions we all had clung to. The confrontation with my past reached its zenith as I took the stand for my own testimony. Speaking under oath, I laid bare the internal conflicts, the years of hiding, the fear, and the eventual liberation through love for Carter. The words flowed with a honesty that surprised even me, describing the trade-offs, the lost relationships, and the awakening that made it all worthwhile. Carter watched from the gallery, her eyes shining with pride. The jury seemed moved, their nods subtle, but significant. The drama peaked when my father took the stand, his voice breaking as he admitted the lawsuit stemmed more from fear of change than genuine harm. The admission hung in the air, a turning point that exposed the human frailty behind the legal facade. Outside the courthouse, the social prejudice continued, with protesters on both sides turning the case into a symbol of larger debates. Friends who had ghosted me reached out with mixed messages, some offering support, others questioning my choices. Each interaction tested my resolve, forcing me to reaffirm my decisions daily. Carter and I leaned on each other more than ever, our conversations turning philosophical about the nature of family loyalty versus personal integrity. The toll was evident in our tired eyes, but the bond grew stronger, forging us into a united front against the world. The judge's deliberation period felt eternal, filled with anxious waiting and quiet reflections. I revisited every choice from the first date to the wedding day, weighing the consequences against the joy. The psychological depth of the journey had changed me irrevocably, from a woman torn by guilt to one who understood that true honor lay in authenticity, not conformity. The betrayal by family members, though painful, had clarified my path. The price of love included loss, but also the gift of self-discovery. As the final day approached, the air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation. Lawyers made their last appeals, the family side pleading for tradition, and the defense for equality under the law. I held Carter's hand tightly during the closing moments, feeling the weight of every decision, every sacrifice. The internal conflict had resolved into a quiet certainty that no matter the outcome, our love was valid and worth defending. The drama had tested us to the core, but it had also revealed our strength. The judge entered the courtroom with a solemn expression that silenced all whispers. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, I rule in favor of the defendant. The lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. Furthermore, the court affirms the marriage between Gwendolyn Ellis and Carter Mills as not only valid, but the only union in this matter deserving full legal recognition and protection under state law. Gasps rippled through the room. My family sat frozen in disbelief, their carefully constructed case crumbling before them. My mother lowered her head while my father stared straight ahead, his face a mask of defeat. Clara glanced at me briefly, her eyes filled with regret, but the damage was done. In the aftermath, the world outside the courthouse felt both lighter and heavier. Reporters swarmed us with questions, but Carter and I slipped away to a quiet park where we had shared many happy moments. Sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, I reflected on the journey, the confrontations, the betrayals, and the profound awakening that had reshaped my life. The family ties I once cherished were severed, but in their place stood a new foundation built on truth and love. Carter squeezed my hand, her smile soft and reassuring. We had paid the price in lost relationships and emotional scars, but we had gained each other fully and without reservation. The social prejudice lingered in subtle ways, old contacts fading and community whispers continuing, but they no longer defined me. I had learned that the cost of authenticity was high yet infinitely worth it. The moral dilemmas that once tormented me now served as lessons in resilience and the right to choose one's path despite opposition. My decisions had ripple effects, hurting those I loved, but they also freed me from a cage of expectations. As we walked hand in hand into the sunset, I felt a deep peace, the kind that comes from knowing you fought for what mattered most. The legal victory brought practical changes too, access to benefits and protections we had been denied, but more importantly, it affirmed our story in the eyes of the law. My family made no further contact, their silence a final chapter in our fractured history. I mourned the loss in quiet moments, but Carter helped me see the growth that emerged from the pain. The drama had been intense, the psychological battles exhausting, but the outcome proved that love could triumph over prejudice when defended with courage. Looking back at every choice, every tear, and every moment of doubt, I realized the journey had been necessary for my evolution. The family that sued me had unknowingly given me the greatest gift: clarity about what truly mattered. As we built our life together in Chicago, the scars remained, but they served as reminders of our strength. The experience taught me that standing for one's truth often requires sacrifice, but the reward is a life lived without regret. Was fighting for my authentic love worth sacrificing the family that raised me, or should I have conformed to their demands for the sake of peace?